the the function of a woman rabbi is something that we don't. It's relatively new in Jewish history. Women didn't usually fulfill ritual functions, and therefore were not in that position. There were cases here and there throughout history of learned women, and we know of women who received private smichot. The famous one is Regina Jonas in the time of the Second World War. But institutions that ordain women only started doing that towards the end of the 20th century. We have Sally Present in the Hebrew Union College in the United States in 1972, Amy Eilberg at JTS in 1985. I think the first Orthodox institution that ordained a woman was was in the States in 2009, Sarah Hurwitz, and of course Reconstructionists in Renewal. All of this is also related to the fact that in traditional Judaism, the position of the rabbi is connected also with halachic functions, and a woman was limited as to her participation in different halachic positions. This especially is true because of two basic concepts in halakha about women's role. One of them is about women who are exempt from positive commandments. They are time-bound. You have some sources in front of you. I'm not sure how much we're going to go into the sources. And the other principle is the principle that somebody who is not obligated to fulfill a mitzvah cannot make other people fulfill through him or through her. And so therefore every time we have to check and see what it is that women can do and can't do in order to know that she can make men also fulfill their obligations through her. Throughout the ages, and not only in modern times, rabbis asked if women can take upon themselves certain obligations and therefore be in the same position as men. And you also have sources in that handout about how already in the Middle Ages there were rabbis that said, no way, a woman can't do precepts that are in a time-bound limit, and there are those who said that they can, but they can't say a blessing, they can't say a bracha, and there are those that said that if they already do it, they can do a blessing, and all of this, of course, influences what happens in modern times with different movements. We have here with us two rabbis from other movements. Rabbanit Dr. Jenny Rosenfeld is Orthodox, and Harav Alona Nir Keren, who's Reform. You all know me. I'm Rabbi Diana Villa, who teaches here at the Beit Midrash, and Professor Alice Shalvi is with us. She's also going to ask some questions. She's very involved with all these issues for many, many years. So we will start off by letting each one of the women rabbis present how they see themselves as women rabbis and in their particular movements.
Should I stand or?
Things people don't see.
Okay. So I would, you know what? I'm gonna come here. Just. All right. So Boker Tov, good morning. First, I would like to say thank you for inviting me. I have to say that I feel a bit out of my water, my natural water, in two senses. One, as you can hear my accent. I'm native-born Israeli, so my English, you know, when I'm speaking English in front of such a sacred audience, and I can see familiar faces, thank you for coming. So I already feel like one hand is tied behind my back because I'm not speaking Hebrew. So, again, excuse me for, you understand. All right, so thanks. So that was the first, apology, which I will try from the next apology not to use any apologetic language at all. So the next one is, I was sent the title of this conversation, and I immediately sent an email back to Rabbi Diana saying, that my point of the starting point is not halachically. I'm not apologetic about not being halachically, not living by Orthodox halakha, and not, not referring it as always the only thing that I need to, treat or consider, right? And reading all the sources, I said, okay, what do I have to say about it? And thinking about it quite a lot, I do have a lot of things to say about it. I hope that you will not kick me out of this room, but but I will start with, I'm sure you cannot see my name tag, but if you will get close, you will see that it's with a pen. They corrected it. Why? Because usually when female rabbis, the Hebrew title, when female rabbis in the last 15 years are, okay, I'm gonna stand next to you, be safe. So when female rabbis are introduced, so in the last 10, 15 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're introduced as Rabbah, right? The female name for Rav. And so if we're talking historically, and I think Rabbi Diana said it, though in the Reform movement and thinking and theology, we always said we are equal. Of course, everybody was born, B'Tselem Elohim bara otam, Zachar v'Nekeva bara otam. It wasn't culturally and not organization-wise. That women treated equally, especially not in leadership positions, and only in the last in Israel, only in the last less than 20 years, there are female rabbis as well. So the first generation said, we are the same, it's very, very equal and parallel to the feminist movements. We are exactly the same as our colleagues, our male colleagues, so you should call us Rav. The next generation, I think, and if I'm going to do it generalizing, said, oh no, we are bringing something special to this field of work and our life, as female is significant, so we should call us, in a different terms, Rabbah. And I think that my generation, and I'm going to share it with you, I'm kind of a baby rabbi. This is only my third year as a rabbi. So my generation has the right, and I'm totally saying right, and I'm standing next to part of the people that are enable me to choose between Rav and Rabbah. I chose Rav, and this is a really a challenge. Why? Because all the time, almost every day, like yesterday, a person asked me the same question. It's not questioning, but it is a question. Why do you choose Rav? There is already a term in Hebrew, Rabbah. Be proud of your femininity. And for me, I chose Rav. And I have to say that, it was a struggle. Like, I am a feminist, I'm a lesbian, so it's kind of, goes together sometimes. So it was kind of really hard to come to both of my communities and saying, I'm not going to choose Rabbah, not because I'm, looking at the other side and not referring to but I'm choosing Rav because I have the right to choose. And because every time I'm saying Shalom, I'm Rav Alona, or every time that they have to correct my name tag with a pen, I'm actually making a declaration that, yes, I have the right to choose between, or I have the option to choose between Rabbah and Rav. And I think this is, if you talked before about advancing and how in the last 20 years there is change, so that is a change. I'm in a generation that I can choose, and this is a huge thing to choose. So I think that for now, I think I said enough. I would say that I would be more than happy to say more about how the fact that I'm a woman contributes to my rabbinate, and there is a lot of things to contribute about, but I think that I will turn the microphone on.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I think that I'll start from the point at which Rav Alona left off in terms of speaking about the titles. I use the title Rabbanit, Rabbanit Jenny Rosenfeld. I'm coming from the Orthodox movement. And for me, the choice to choose the title Rabbanit was also a choice. a choice I think that's different because the title of Rabbanit, or in English as it would be said, Rebbitzin, has a certain connotation. For me growing up as, the rabbi's wife, the person who would make the big kugel, who would make the cookies, who would, that less of a rabbinic function and more of a warm, hospitable woman who stood to the side of the rabbi. Okay? Now, my husband is not a rabbi, so using the title Rabbanit doesn't do anything in terms of saying that about my status. I chose the title Rabbanit rather than Rav or Rabbah to distinguish myself in that in the Orthodox movement, the title Rabbah is generally not used. It's usually seen as a kind of, a boundary statement. Someone who's Rabbah is in the Reform movement, someone who's Rabbanit is in the Orthodox movement. But I also feel the Orthodox movement was, of course, obviously, the last in terms of the movements to start ordaining women. And I think that the language of rabbi and calling a woman a rabbi is still something that's jarring for many in the Orthodox community. And coming in, filling a rabbinic function. The truth is, honestly, even sitting on this panel and hearing the word rabbi, rabbi, rabbi over and again, it's jarring for me too. Whereas saying that I fulfill a rabbinic function is completely true, but also feels more comfortable for me to say. In other words, in entering into a territory that's new in the Orthodox community, it was very important for me to bring people in. Okay, to come in a way that I'm not going to alienate people, standing up there, even though, of course, I can't say that I'm not a feminist. Of course I am, and I'm indebted to the feminist movement. But the question is, what do I want to put center stage, okay? And I don't want to come out there as one of the first Orthodox rabbinic figures in a way that's going to be in people's face and in a way that's going to impair my ability to really help people. And Professor Shalvi, you spoke before about Malka Pitrikovsky and the fact that she's gotten Orthodox men and Haredi men asking her questions. I definitely have that same experience as well. And every time that that an Orthodox man or a man that's even more ultra-Orthodox than myself will ask me a question, will have a conversation with me, for me it's a form of victory. Okay, in terms of being able to have that dialogue, in terms of being able to give a shiur to men who are, as observant as myself, older than me, who didn't grow up with this, and who could come over to me after the shiur and ask me a question in learning, okay, in the topic of the shiur, where I see that my gender wasn't center stage. For me, that's a victory. It's to make this normalized, okay? So that's I guess how I wanted to start off, and maybe I'll pass it along, and we'll say more later.
So most of you know me. I grew up in the Orthodox world, and actually one of the things I felt from age 12 was that instead of being part of where everything happens, I was being pushed behind the bars on the top floor to the Ezrat Nashim, and sitting with women who usually didn't know anything and were talking during the whole service. That's what women did at that time. I know it's not true today of many Orthodox women, but from a very young age I felt that there was here some kind of a discrimination that really annoyed me. And growing up in a family where it was obvious that all of the children, the girls and the boy, were going to go just as far academically and professionally and everything, the fact that in religion my brother had a bar mitzvah and the girls at the most got a present of chumashim or something, it was something sort of annoying. Anyway, I don't feel that, I never really felt that I was looked at differently for being a woman rabbi, because even before I was a rabbi, for many, many years I taught rabbinical students in Buenos Aires already before that, and then here I taught students from JTS, from Ziegler, and of course from Schechter, and so I have students who are rabbis all over the world today and who still call me or write me and ask me questions, etc. So I really don't feel that because I'm a woman, my situation was inferior in any way. And I also picked Rav, like Alona said, because I wanted to show that it's the same training and the same authority that my male colleagues have. I remember when I was first ordained, I was interviewed for Laisha, and the title the woman put on the interview was Al tikreu la Rabbanit, because that's really something I feel like Rabbanit is a Rebbitzin, and I'm here because of who am I, what I am, and what I studied, and not because of any husband or anything like that. So for me, it was really something I can't identify with. Anyway, in Israel, we have Reform women rabbis since 92 and conservative since 93. A couple of years ago, they ordained the first 8 women, Orthodox women rabbis, though I don't know if it's considered an institutional ordination. It was Rabbi Landis, but I don't think it was Pardes itself who ordained them. And we're already quite a lot, even though in the general population in Israel it's still considered a weird thing, and most people don't understand what it is. And most people, even if they're not if they're traditional or if they're secular, they still feel that that's a weird thing. How can a woman be doing this thing? One of the interesting questions I always get is about, oh, but you're impure. How can you even touch a Torah scroll and everything? So Rabbi Monique Ziskin-Goldberg Zal and I wrote many years ago a booklet called Lilmod Ulelamed number 5, to learn and to teach. It's online if any of you want to read it in 5 languages, where we explain that halacha basically does not have any problem with women touching Torah scrolls and all the rest. It's just influence of mysticism that seeped into halachic writings, and it's really not a problem. But there are a lot of a lot of prejudices about these issues, and people, even completely secular people, are convinced that that's a problem and that's impossible, that something like that should be. So as far as ideologically and as far as the movement, we as Masorti conservative rabbis are somewhere in the middle between the two of you, even though probably we're much closer to you than most of the Orthodox world, because that's a more open liberal orthodoxy, because we consider that every issue that comes up as far as women in halacha, we have to prove it halachically. But we will take into account all sources from the Talmud to our times, and we'll take into consideration information we get from history, archaeology, manuscripts, and other sources as well. And we can't say, like the Reform can say, based on their ideology, that we consider it maybe unethical or unacceptable ideologically to have to bar women from certain positions or from certain mitzvot, etc. But we also don't consider that in a generalized fashion we can say that they can't do this or they can't do that, and we will go and investigate every single question and see whether there is a basis to allow a woman to fulfill that function, especially based on the 2 principles I mentioned at the beginning. In each case, to see if it's a mitzvah that's limited by time, it's by time-bound, limited, positive command, and whether it's something where the issue of women helping men observe is relevant or not. There is a book in Hebrew and English by Rabbi Golinkin on women in halacha, where you will see many of these issues and proving it from the sources how women can do these things. Monique and I wrote also 5 booklets about these issues, which are online in Responsa for today. And so we have to investigate every single issue and see where the boundaries are. Of course, there are different interpretations. Also, in all of the movements, there are different interpretations. There isn't just one position, but we have to show through the sources what it is that we're willing to do or we will allow to do. Thank you. I would like Alice to ask some questions now, Professor Alice Shalvi.
Ask or to answer? No, I just want to relate to this first issue of nomenclature, how we define ourselves and what we call ourselves. And I totally agree that Rebbitzin or Rabbanit does conjure up various connotations that you rightly say of providing the refreshments and so on. So, yes, Rabbanit, I think not. But then we come to the choice of Rav or Rabbah. Now, Hebrew is a gendered language, right? And the question is, do women distinguish themselves by adding by taking the feminine form? We don't say more when a woman teacher steps into the class. We say mora. And there are many professions, we say rofa, not rofe. Okay? So the question is, why are we, but on the other hand, we do in English say doctor for everything. In other words, you have to relate to the fact that Hebrew is a gendered language. It has no neutral form, right? So you have to choose between male and female. And that's why I think that Rabbah is justified, just as Rofa and Mora are justified, right? And I think that, Jenny, I understand your particular situation as being a delicate one, the most delicate, right? Because on the whole, Orthodox Judaism is only just beginning to accept women in the rabbinical role, right? But I wonder, and yes, you will offend some people if you call yourself Rabbah. And the question is, should we be true to ourselves as women, as feminists? It's precisely, I would say, that as feminists we should make the point, yes, I am a woman, right? I have a woman's perspective. I really think that women rabbis obviously have a different perspective on everything, right? Why reject that difference, right? So I would say, all right, I'm a rebel. Okay, בסדר, מורדת, right? By the way, parenthetically, many years ago, soon after started at Pelach, I had to go fundraising in the States, of course, who doesn't? I was delighted when Rabbi Riskin asked me to speak between Mincha and Mariv on Shabbat at his synagogue. Right? It was really an honor. And at that point, I was very, very naive about these differentiations between the various movements. And I said in my talk, right, that halacha is from the same root as lalechet, right? And halacha must therefore go forward. It's got to move, right? It can't be stuck in one place. Rabbi Riskin called me over afterwards and said, Alice, you can't say that, right? Okay, that is the opinion of the conservative movement, right? And that's when I first learned the difference between Orthodox and conservative, right? Well, I still believe that we have to move forward, and I'm very happy that even Rabbi Riskin now has moved forward.
You want to ask questions to us?
Can I respond?
No, I'm
You
not
don't want to ask
asking
us?
questions.
No?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Well, if I could just respond to a couple of those points. Okay. So the first is that I really have thought about the issue of the title and how to be true to myself. And calling myself Rabbah, I would not feel true to myself. Calling myself Rabbanit, and I think reclaiming and giving new meaning to the title Rabbanit is something that's meaningful. And it's something that I'm doing not as a way of kowtowing to anyone, but as a way of finding the way to be true to myself, finding a title that reflects that I'm doing something new in a community that wasn't doing it before, and finding a way to do that with respect for others, but also respect for myself, and also to distinguish myself in that there are certain very basic assumptions that I and a rabbah would have very differently. Okay, the first being in terms of the role of halakha. Coming from the Orthodox movement, I see halakha as something that is completely binding. I see it as something that does move forward, and I'm very surprised at that quote from Rabbi Riskin. I will ask him about it next week. Right? Okay, it could be that he himself has changed. But I think that no one would dispute the fact that halakha is a dynamic force. It's something that's always evolving and changing based on circumstances. The question, I think, where we would argue is probably over the limits of, are there certain things that are absolute, or are there certain things that need to change only in particular circumstances and not in others? But I think the fact that Judaism is moving forward in all of its denominations is something that's a reality. So that's important for me to say. Okay.
So I would like to refer to Alice's remark about, and it's funny for me, like the mirror image in a way. It's the same question, just from the other side. First, I want to say that I was born to a very, very secular family. So it is really like a mirror image, taking out all God and everything connected to it out of the equations. Very Zionistic, very Jewish in a culturally and national way, but nothing to do with religion and belief or faith. So, but referring to Rav or Rabbah in Hebrew is, of course, taking gender very, very seriously, unfortunately. I think, like, the question, why should a Reform rabbi not naturally choose Rabbah, like the feminine way, I think it went back to what am I, to actually asking very deep questions about, and for me the definition was, is it, I'm going to be like a profession, is rabbi is my professional word, or it's kind of a title that, as a lighthouse, or is directing all my way of living. And for me it was the second choice, of course. And why do I say that? Because every time I go to my dentist, or or every time I take in a taxi, or every time I need to sit in front of in a bank and write my profession, I write Rav. And it's kind of, and always it's a statement, and it always open like a very, very long discussions of how did I choose it, why. And so for me it's a way of teaching other people. It's my my shlichut, my, how do you say shlichut? Thank you. So it's just a tool. I have to say that many times I'm referred, not as, if I'm referred as a rabbanit, I correct them and I say, no, that's my wife, which she, of course, gets very angry because she's not into refreshments at all. But every time that we go past the rabbanit thing, and I'm talking about why Rav and not Rabbah, then it open another option in the person's mind that I'm speaking with. So I hope that's answer your remark.
I think what we've heard here, is very typical of the flexibility of feminism, right? We can choose, right? And I think the fact that three women here, have each chosen a different way, all of which are totally legitimate, right? And have chosen a particular way in order to be true to themselves, right? Again, indicates the way in which we do not need to be hidebound, the extent to which we have the privilege of changing and of choosing. So, kol hakavod to all of you. You've really taken different approaches.
Actually, I just thought of the fact that when I was still in rabbinical school and Alice was the president of Schechter, she started here a workshop for women rabbinical students. And we had a meeting here at Schechter or at the college every 2 weeks, I think. I know some of those reform, today they're all rabbis, like 20 years maybe because of that. And we discovered that many of the problems we faced, which I think were probably even more at the time than they are today, were exactly the same kind of problems, that it had nothing to do with what ideology or what position you had about halakha. It more had to do with the fact that what is a woman doing there, you know? So we would think of things like somebody from the congregation could come up to a woman and rabbi and call her a motik, which they would never do to a male rabbi. And things like that. And it was really very interesting. We found that it was called a workshop for what's Hatzama? Empowerment workshop for rabbinic women rabbinic students, and it was really, we were all in the same boat in that issue. You wanted to ask something?
I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Rabba Arlene Berger.
Ah, okay.
Because when I wanted to be a rabbi, initially I was a young girl, I was Orthodox, and there were not women rabbis. So I decided when I grew up, I was not going to be a rabbi, I was going to be a rabbah. And my rabbah is a dafka.
Uh-huh.
In the States, there are not many rabbis. And I have to fight every day to be called rabbah, and it opens conversations everywhere I go. So, and on my name tag, I had to change the rabbi to rabbah, because there wasn't an option on the form to fill out rabbah, which I thought was interesting.
The interesting thing is I wrote very clearly that she was supposed to be Rabbanit and Alona and I were supposed to be Rav, and they still made both of us Rabbah. So, okay, good. Yeah. Which question? No, it was just a comment. It was a comment. It was a comment. Yeah, she's quoting that there's a section in the Talmud that says that more important than whether you're called Rav or whatever, or whatever other title you have, is what your name is. I mean, who you represent and who you are, and not so much the title. Okay, that was the comment.
And they're the greatest rabbis were didn't have the title, yeah. The Amoraim and the Gemara don't have it.
Yeah. Okay. Any of you want to say anything in particular? Alice, you have more questions?
No,
You wanted to ask about the God issue?
Yeah, I want to hear more.
You want to hear? Yes. You wanted to ask? Sure. I can't hear you. Can you stand up?
Sure. Training. Okay, great. Okay, I'm happy to explain. I'll repeat the question. Where did I study and how do I function in the community? Okay, so I have been studying Jewish texts ever since I can remember. I grew up in Riverdale, New York. I studied in SAR Academy. Anyone? Okay, so I started learning Gemara in 6th grade, and that quickly became my favorite subject. And I was just talking to the Rabbah in the audience before starting. I used to stand in my dining room teaching to the imaginary, multitudes that were sitting there as as a 6th grader, studying Gemara and just really being just excited by it. It's like, and for anyone who learns Talmud, it really is just the intellectual fun, like nothing else. And so it did take me a while to come to studies of halakha, which for many years, even though I was fully Orthodox in practice, I just said, the study of halakha, I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to open up the questions that I felt that it would bring for me, or the tensions that it might cause for me. And then at a certain point, I did work on issues of Judaism and sexuality, and through that, I really came to the study of halakha, because I felt that I was going around teaching, and that a lot of the teaching I was doing was ending in a very frustrating place where people were saying to me, okay, but what's the bottom line halacha? And I was forced to say, okay, everyone can go home and ask their local rabbi, when at the same time I knew, okay, the local rabbi is not going to be giving the answers that I think are right. And then I said, you know what, I've got to go study and turn myself into a halachic authority so that what I'm saying can have more meaning in this community. So it's kind of a very roundabout way that I came to study in Midreshet Lindenbaum at the Susie Bradfield Women's Institute for Halachic Leadership at Midreshet Lindenbaum or Torah Stone, the full title of the program that I studied. It's a 5-year program that parallels rabbinic smicha, rabbinic studies for men. We study Shabbat, kashrut, the laws of family purity, the laws of marriage, of mourning, the very same realms that men study. And at the end of that time, I received what's known as a heter hora'ah, permission to teach, or permission to give halachic rulings. The way that the Gemara refers to it is yoreh, that when a rabbi had a student that reached a certain level of learning, he said to him basically, get out of here, start teaching yourself. You're no longer need to be just a student, but you can also go and teach. So I studied in Midreshet Lindenbaum. It's a program that's been around for over 10 years. I just want to put that on the table in terms of when were the first Orthodox women ordained here in Israel. It's about, I think, maybe 6 years ago that the first 2 Rabbaniot were ordained from Midreshet Lindenbaum, Rabbanit Anat Novoselsky and Rabbanit Idit Bartov. So that's probably back in 2012. I then, through learning in this program, met Rabbi Shlomo Riskin, who is the rabbi of Efrat, and he basically invited me to come to Efrat. The way that I saw it was as a form of an experiment, okay? As him saying, okay, here we are training women for this position. Let's kind of throw someone out, into the field and see what happens. Okay? I started working in Efrat really not knowing what to expect. And I have to say, thinking back on it, I feel blessed that people in the community were willing to give it a chance. It's not at all self-evident that I would come there and people would, start just asking me questions. But I came and I really have been blessed to get a lot of questions. It's important for me to say in this context, when we're thinking about change and thinking about how things evolve, that when I first came to Efrat, my questions were almost exclusively from English speakers and almost exclusively from women. They were only from men in the instances that husbands came with their wives together to ask me a question. Okay? I've now been in Efrat more than 3 years, and I would say probably after the first year or two, I noticed a shift in that suddenly the Hebrew and English were much more balanced, to the point that I now answer my phone only in Hebrew, and that the men and women also were much more balanced, and that I have a significant number of men who come to me alone without their wives to ask me questions because they want to. Okay, and in Efrat, there are many rabbis, okay, most of them men, and people have a choice. And what I feel in coming into this field as a rabbanit is that I want to give people more options, okay? There weren't always women doctors. And today, every man and woman has the choice. What gender doctor do you want to see? And I really believe that for the sake of lahagdil Torah u lahadira, to increase the glory of Torah and really to spread the number of people that have access to Torah, I'm there as another address. And a lot of times people will come and speak to me if they felt that there isn't a rabbi that they can connect with. Sometimes people who feel marginalized, sometimes marginal issues in people's lives, that they feel this is a question that I can ask to a woman. And it can be something, as basic as something like one of the first questions I got was about permanent makeup. And the woman felt like, I at the time did not know what permanent makeup was. Also, the last time I wore unpermanent makeup was at my wedding. But they felt, okay, this is a woman, and I don't want my rabbi to know that I go through these beauty treatments, so I can ask that to a woman. But I think that on a deeper level, a lot of the questions that I get are coming from people going through divorce, mental illness, financial hardship, people who feel a little bit kind of distanced from the mainstream community, a little bit on the outside, and I think feel like, okay, you're a woman, you yourself are a little bit on the outside, and so I'm somehow more safe. Sorry for that lengthy response.
So just continuing, how a female rabbi opens other opportunities. So I have a community, קהילת מבשרת ציון. It's about 150 families and 50 families, extra 50 families of 3 kindergartens. So it's one of the, I would not say the biggest, but it's a big community in the reform movement, which I'm very proud of. I'm also a resident of מבשרת ציון, which is, if you happen to be there, it's 15 minutes out of Jerusalem to the west side. So please come and say shalom. But how do I, as given an option, and again, it is a mirror, my community in a large sense is very, very different as a frat. Most of the residents are secular, but when you're saying secular in Israeli culture and society, it's very, very different than saying secular in, for example, for the North American society. So even though they are secular, they are carrying with them a lot of prejudice, perceptions, and what is Masoret, or what is Moreshet Israel, if to quote our cultural minister, which I'm not going to quote, Miri Regev. Sorry? What is? Oh, sorry. So, right. Thank you. So Masoret and Moreshet are tradition. And I totally feel in that sense traditionalist. When, for example, usually I'm not going around with a kippah or, in my tnuah, in my stream, usually it will be a kippah. I'm not. I have to say that it challenged my own feeling as a woman wearing something that is very, very distinctive male traditional wear. The only place where I do come and wear a kippah, do you want to guess? No, not in the services, no. In? Cemetery. In? Mamash lo. Thank you. I have my colleague here who totally understand me. In the kindergarten. When I'm entering a kindergarten, my 3 classes once a week, I always wear a really, really big kippah. Okay? Which, by the way, Ian knitted it to me. Ian is, again, a colleague, actually started to learn here and then moved to HUC. So why do I do that? Two goals. First, all the little girls that are calling me Rav Alona, and they see me with a kippah. And everybody are wearing a kippah in our, once a week, or I'm talking about Parashat HaShavua, or we are doing Havdalah, whatever activity I'm doing with them. So it's in a context of a religion, faith, and I'm a leader of that thing, and I'm wearing a kippah. And everybody, girls and boys, are wearing a big kippah, white, with the initials of Kamatz. It's our our synagogue. And actually, in the beginning of the year, the parents are asked to paint and decorate the kippah as an activity. And again, imagine yourself, secular father is sitting and decorating his daughter kippah. This is surreal in an Israeli culture, but they do, and that's a way to say this is an option. You don't have to. We say to the kids, girls and boys, you don't have to wear kippah. Everybody wears a kippah because they see me wearing a kippah. So through 3 years, and then through our youth movement, they are just getting old, and it's a wonder for them that there is sometimes they end in our kindergarten and they're saying there is a male rabbi. That's so weird. So right, you have it true, right? So So again, and of course, the staff that are working in the kindergarten is also given. Most of them are coming from traditional families. Usually, they're not coming from the reform movement because it's new and they're not, they're just working at the kindergarten. And again, for them, is to give an example. Yes, when they come back to their homes and their own communities, they say, you know, being I have a female rabbi. She's not my rabbi, but I work with her and I hear, her teaching every week, even though it's for kids level, but it's still teaching. And by my body, which is a feminine body, with a kippah on my head, I also make a stance. So it's I think that opening options for our societies is actually the things that we do every day, and not only with our words, but with our titles and with our bodies and with what we wear. I think that the age of them is 3, actually 2, 3, and 4. Some of them, so they don't get mixed up because it's just a given. So if actually the teacher that was their teacher, you see, the rabbi that a year before me, she goes by Rabba Liora. So when you introduce yourself as Rabba Liora, for them it's a given. They're not asking questions. I don't think that they even understand what we understand as adults. I mean, not understand, but have the exactly. I would say we're mekulkal, enough. How do you say mekul? Broken or messed up, right? It's just a given for them.
I don't think that, well, you'll talk for yourself later, but I don't think that any of us answer just questions of family law. I teach here Orach Chaim and Yoredea and Even Ezer, and I get asked questions that have to do with mourning and with tefillah and with Shabbat and all kinds of things. Well, I worked for many years and wrote about women agunot, so of course I also get a lot of questions about divorce and prenups and all that, but I get a lot of questions about all issues of women in halacha. And I only wanted to add that even when I'm writing or when I'm answering something, I do feel that that the fact that I am a woman gives me a perspective which is sometimes different. I remember when we wrote the book with Monique, and sometimes I would put in a comment that a male rabbi couldn't understand what difference does that make. To me, I proved to him why it makes a difference. Why from a female perspective you had to include certain things that maybe a male rabbi wouldn't even think of. But I really don't think that we're boxed into only talking about family law and women's issue, but you're welcome to expand on that.
No, I agree. I don't feel like I've been boxed in any way. The questions that I get are a tremendous range. I do get some questions of Jewish family law, but also, as Diana said, I also get questions of Shabbat, of kashrut, of celiac and halacha, all sorts of different questions that have nothing to do with issues of women. But the other thing that I want to say, and the truth is, it's something that I know women feel very differently about, and for some women it will offend, and some women it won't. Generally, I think in the younger generation, women might be more, it might be more of a hot button issue, but I feel comfortable saying that there are issues where some people do turn to me as a woman, and I think that that's also okay, because I am a woman, and I'm not trying to just be a man. In other words, if there are certain failings in the male rabbinate, then okay, then let me also be part of the tikkun, part of the fixing, in that I am a woman, and yeah, I don't see that as a problem. But psak halacha, I give psak halacha, of course. Yeah, in other words, that's what I've been trained to do, and yes, a lot of my work is giving psak halacha. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so my official title in the Kehillah is Manhiga Ruchanit, female spiritual leader. I like how it sounds much better in Hebrew than in English, yeah, that's my official title, Manhiga Ruchanit. When Rabbi Riskin is talking about me, he speaks to me about me as, I don't know, his right-hand woman, who he passes cases along to me that he feels are more suited to me than to him. And I know from the very beginning he's been very happy to have me there, because there are certain cases where he also feels, some of it as a man, some of it other issues, that he is not the one who should be dealing with this issue, and those are issues that he passes along to me, and I'm happy to work with them. No, so the issues, I'll tell you, some of the issues that he felt, personally, I think that it's better that it go through me are issues, are more specific women's issues. Sometimes a woman going through divorce and is sharing a very intimate story, and he felt like, just in terms of issues of propriety, that it is better that a woman be hearing it. Okay? Yeah. I don't want to steal the, yeah. Yeah, I was ordained at Midreshet Lindenbaum by Rabbi Shlomo Riskin and Rav Shuki Reich. So in terms of my Ktav Heter Hora'ah, permission to give rulings in Jewish law, it is signed by Rabbi Riskin and Rav Shuki Reich. No. It is not a Rabbanut. It's not officially through the Rabbanut. It's, the Rabbanut has been asked whether women can take their tests and has responded, no. Okay? I'll just say one last thing. The question was, I guess, cleverly worded by the lawyer as saying, please, Chief Rabbinate, can the women take your tests, not because they want to be rabbis, because we know that only men can be rabbis, but at least let these women take your tests in order to see what level of knowledge they have achieved. And the rabbinate responded by saying, well, since we both agree that women can't be rabbis, and our tests are only given in order to ordain rabbis, they're not given just for intellectual knowledge, then women can't take the tests. Now, I think that is being appealed to the Bagat, to the higher authorities, and I guess stay tuned for the developments there. Okay.
Just to give maybe one example of the question that I get. So sometimes, and I think it's very interesting, because I'm not seen not as myself, and of course not my community, my congregation, as a poseket halacha, because there is not such a thing in a way. Not that there is no halacha, but as poseket halacha. But I do get questions that are rabbinical and halachically, a question. I can just give an example for last week. But bar mitzvah that I was facilitating, how do you say, officiating, right. But bar mitzvah that I was officiating on Shabbat, on Shacharit Shel Shabbat, and unfortunately the grandfather died on Friday evening. So yeah, that was, and the mother, was so concerned of, what should we do? What is the tradition? And I said, I can give you the halachically answer. And of course, she got in the hospital saying that you shouldn't do it, or stuff, or you should do it, but with no singing. And I said, what do you and your mother and your sister? That's the, again, family of women. So it was very. I think it was very significant that a female rabbi could answer them. I asked, what do you want to do? what is your, inner thoughts, feeling, and what would you be comfortable with, and not just you three, but taking into consideration the all the guests in that bar mitzvah. And it doesn't matter what we had at the end, but I think it's the sense that she felt comfortable enough to ask an halachic question without calling it a halachic question, and me actually, throwing the ball back to her, and we are all, had discussions, and I have to say that if she would, in that case, she didn't feel that needed, but of course I offered actually to, open Shulchan Aruch, but the same thing to open other texts, maybe more contemporary, to think about it, to dwell in that question. So in a way, I think that, again, we are opening possibilities of conversation and discussions and learning. It's a learning together. Instead of saying, yes, we should, or not, we shouldn't, but again, this is it's easier, I think, in my movement to answer that question. Yes.
What's your training, learning background? You mentioned at the beginning that you didn't come from a culture of faith,
נכון.
a faith-based culture.
נכון.
So, how did you come to
Okay, so I would try to answer it very short. I was a tour guide of reform movements from, actually not from Northern American, but British and South Africans and Canadians, of teenagers that came for a summer in Israel, and that's the way I was introduced to Judaism that was celebrative and not saying you're not included. And that was like a crack in the door that I slept in, or sleep how do you, that? And 10 years later, I thought that I should, not only study for myself. I studied in Bet Midrash Kolot, and I was, again, excited, as you just said, how exciting the mere intellectual thinking and inspiring and understanding that I cannot say goodbye to 3,000 or more years of wisdom, even though they were written by white males. I'm kidding, not white, but males. So it was in a way reclaiming what I think that belongs to me, and saying, okay, I would do it in my terms. And after doing that is to go and say, how can I change the Israeli society as well? And the way was rabbinical school. Like the way to rabbinical program at the HUC was very short. The program is 4 years. I did it a bit longer because I was already working. So I did it in 6 years, 1 year in the New York campus, and 4 of them here in Jerusalem. And that's my background of studying and learning. I have to say that my bachelor and master degree has nothing to do with Judaism. It's in international relations, and then in conflict resolution. But I have to say it has everything to do with my rabbinical studies. I do it every day.
Is this for me?
Please stand.
I speak louder. You'll have to tell me what she says.
maybe it's not a politically correct question, but I think it would be of interest to everyone, perhaps. I just wonder, as women rabbis, I wonder who actually in practical terms, pays like the salary of women rabbis in Israel.
What was the
Salary of women rabbis. Look, in the reform and in the conservative movement, it really doesn't make a difference if you're a man or a woman. The congregations and the movement divide upon themselves how they pay for it. It has nothing to do with being a man or a woman. Your situation is different because there are very few Orthodox women rabbis who work in the community. Just
to explain to everyone where my salary comes from also. It comes from private donations that Rabbi Riskin has raised. But I want to take this moment to just mention something that I guess hasn't come up, which is really the financial question in terms of women deciding to go into this field. And something that hurts me every time is thinking about the difference between Israel and America in this question. In America, the friends or colleagues that I have at Yeshivat Maharat, which is in the Orthodox movement, ordaining women, go and take jobs as assistant rabbis and get, I assume, full salary and benefits. Okay, here studying in Midrash at Lindenbaum, speaking very honestly, there are women who dropped out of the program in the middle because of financial concerns. Several of the women in the program had husbands who were doctors, who were in startups, who were in big money fields that enabled them to do what they were doing. But it is a problem, particularly in Israel, that women who study for all of those extra years don't find a job that will pay them. Yeah, you know what? You're totally right. It's not only it's not 100% the same, but it's a problem for men also, which has to do with the fact that most communities don't necessarily pay their shul rabbi, and so that's here in Israel, and that's a problem for men. It's a problem for women also, right? But it is also a problem for women. In other words, there's certain positions like a rabbi of a city, a rabbi of a town, which the government does sponsor. But those positions, from what I understand, are very often filled by people, and I'm not going to know the word, how to say this in English, more of a jobnik, a way of giving a connected person a cushy salary for the rest of his life without having to do anything. But if those jobs would turn into merit-based jobs, it would certainly open up the field for both men and women. So that's...
No, I want to ask a question, if you don't mind, because we've been talking about women rabbis, right? I want to ask another question because it's something that has concerned me a lot in recent years, and that is, how do you refer to the divinity, right? I've had a lot of trouble with prayers. I can no longer pray to Avinu, Malkeinu. That doesn't make me think. I don't think of the divinity of God in terms of a Lord, a Father, and so on, in a strictly male, masculine form, right? And this is where the absence of a neutral form in Hebrew really bothers me, right? But it also bothers me in English, right? Is it a he or is it a she? You can't, I say this in all sincerity. I have changed my mode of prayer, right? And I pray to a divine spirit. For me, the Godhead is neither male nor female, right? And the question is, what language, in this gendered language, can we as women devise for this asexual divinity? Right? And I think that for me is a far more urgent question than, am I a rabbah, a rabbanit, and so on. I mean, I think that's, the essence of prayer is who you are praying to. Whom do you worship, right? Not who's the halachic authority. Right? That, quite honestly, no longer bothers me, right? Okay? I choose one. Aselech harav, right? Choose your rabbi. That's the great thing in Judaism, right? I can choose who I go to in the hope that I'm going to get the kind of answer I really want, right? But of course. But I have the choice. But now when it comes to my prayer, right, that's where I'm finding the language problematic, you know.
Okay. So in this point, I really don't agree. I feel that I want to pray in the same language as my ancestors always prayed. I grew up praying Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Avraham v'Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov, and I have no need to include the matriarchs, and I have no need to every time it says men to say women, and I feel that it's very forced that in our Sidurim, in our conservative Sidurim, every time it says a male word they have to include in brackets to add the women. The fact that I pray to a God who's described as a father and king really doesn't bother me at all, but I think I may be in a minority within the conservative movement on this issue. I'm surely not in the reform movement. So.
So I then feel comfortable slipping in and saying, that tradition is something that's important to me. And this applies not only in terms of the questions of God, but in terms of questions of changing the nusach hatfilah. What is it going to take for us to change the liturgy? And I personally feel very attached to the traditional liturgy because I have memories of my grandfather, of blessed memory, my grandmother, people in my life that I saw praying, and to know that I use that same prayer book and that I pray with the same words as my ancestors is something that's meaningful to me. Now, if you ask the question of how do we actually conceive of God, I think that the time when I thought about God in those terms of kind of with a face attached to it was probably when I was a child, and the Wizard of Oz is the most salient image that I can think of in terms of imagining God, okay? Exactly. So I think that as I grew older, the image was less meaningful in terms of the image kind of faded away, and I'm praying to God. Now, to me, the male language, the female language also doesn't matter, and I should say this as the English speaker on the panel. Usually, I'm at the tremendous disadvantage speaking in Hebrew, and one of the most common mistakes that my husband is always pointing out to me is that I'll confuse the Lashon Zachar and Lashon Nekeva, okay, the male and the female language. It's very hard to keep track of, and as someone who made Aliyah, I've heard from people that I'll never get it right. So, speaking about God in the male language, sometimes I speak about myself in the male language, so...
So as a Hebrew native speaker, the first year I went into the rabbinical program and started praying in, shigra, tadir, in a routine, and I find it very, very hard to use the male pronouns for the divinity, for God, because I do understand every word, and I do understand when it's lach or lecha, and so of course the Reform movement, actually the sidurim the sidurim that we are still using, Avodah Shebalev, were put together at 1982, and they still have only, which is funny, only Avotenu. There are no matriarchs in it, so being a new student and a new person to the prayers, not only I had to read only Avotenu, but I have to memorize that everybody are singing Eni Motenu. So I was like, okay, so why it's not written there? So hopefully they're actually writing now a new Sidur, adding all the Motenu, and not in brackets and not in gray, but in black and the same. But the question is, I think that, or the answer that I have, and as much as I practiced in a sense of really tirgul, like practicing every again and again prayer, I did understand that there are two layers. One is the intellectual layer that I'm, or my intellectual mind when I'm praying, and I do think about every word that I say, and there is a emotional or non-intellectual way that I pray. And if I'm entering that level, I have to say that it doesn't matter. I have to say that I'm very close to what my colleagues said, Jenny, right? And it doesn't matter. But I think, again, as maybe because most of my congregates or the people that I address to are coming from the secular world, and they do pay attention to the words. It's really important for me to have the option. So to say Shechina sometimes instead of Eloheinu, and to say, she instead of he. And yeah, I do that sometimes. But I have to say that, again, a lot of the songs or the liturgy, in form, most of it is sang. So sometimes, as we just sang Aleinu, you cannot fit in the Imotenu, or you cannot fit in because of the music. So what do you do with that? So then I try to go into the non-intellectual and just not pay attention. And so, but it is a challenge. It is a challenge for me, and I think that in a sense, again, in my intellectual mode, I'm very much with you. So I try to balance between the two things.